Hello, everyone. I'm going to do a complete summary of my book, The Ecstasy and the Ignominy. So, warning now. Hope I didn't get too close to the microphone then, but so a warning now. If you intend to read The Ecstasy and the Ignominy in the future, then don't watch this video until you've actually read the book. Um, I would strongly advise that. And now, for those of you who may have already read it, the few of you, or those who simply don't care, then go ahead. Or if you're the kind of person who doesn't really mind spoilers, but that's in some cases, if you know the entire plot, you may want to read something. Then go ahead. But if you don't like spoilers, then I would strongly advise you to stop watching the video now. Okay, so now we're going to get into it. And the reason I have the book up front here so you can see the cover and you can feel the presence of the book. But so now this isn't going to be a very detailed summary. This is going to be essentially the basic elements of the outline. I may leave out certain minor plots or characters out, or although I will try to mention as many as possible. So the Ecstasy and the Ignominy, I'll just read to you the summary first. Set in the 19th century, The Ecstasy and the Ignominy explores the agonies and tribulations of the people of Harrisville, an industrial town on the brink of revolution. Catherine Harris, the wife of a wealthy industrialist, is tempted by the sympathy of Edward Compton, a man disillusioned by life. Their forbidden passion unfolds against the backdrop of a tumultuous insurrection, testing loyalties and breaking alliances. So essentially, the Ecstasy and the Ignominy is about this town called Harrisville, probably somewhere in America. I'm not sure exactly where. I don't think a town like Harrisville really ever existed, really. Um, it is more of like a fantasy town that I created in the 19th century. It's near the mountains, somewhere with mountains and ocean. Looks in many ways kind of more like Norway in many ways. I mean, it's supposed to be somewhere in America. But if you were to film it as a movie, though, it would probably be better to film it in like Norway or New Zealand. Um, but anyway, and so you have the character of Catherine Harris. Again, this is not a deep dive into the themes; it's just the basic plot. You have the character of Catherine Harris, who is married to this wealthy industrialist named Frederick Harris, who and he's kind of like a Scrooge-like character. He's very abusive of her. And he even hits her at times. I mean, he doesn't beat her, but he is not a good husband in many ways. And she feels trapped in her marriage. And he's like the main industrialist in the town. He makes, I think, steel. I mean, what he does is actually vague. Um, but anyway, the storyline essentially is that you have the character of Edward, who is a man who works for Frederick. He, over the course of the story, falls in love with Catherine. Edward is a sensitive artist. Catherine is in a marriage that she doesn't like, and they ultimately, over the course of the story, fall in love because he will often meet her when he goes to talk to Frederick, who Frederick Harris essentially. There's this in the town. There is what you would call this almost a communist kind of revolution that's stirring, where you have the character of Bertrand Shaw, who is this philosopher in the town who is trying to stir up the workers so they will take over the town and overthrow the industrialists, essentially. And and so Frederick sends Edward to spy on Bertrand Shaw, and so he sees, though, Catherine a lot when he reports things, and also when they find each other by the ocean or taking walks in the woods, and they fall in love over the course of the story. It's kind of a forbidden passion, and but at the same time, you have the character of Desmond I mean, not Desmond, Desmond Archer, who I kind of based a little on Richard III and other characters. Um, who Desmond is someone that he is very crude person. He's an employee of Frederick. He works with Edward, and he's a very sinister villain. He can be cruel, but he can also be charming. And so so there's a side storyline with him where he tries to, well, he seduces his landlady, Miss Ingram, kind of like how Richard III seduced Lady Anne, even though there's an implication that Frederick actually, not Frederick, that Desmond actually killed Miss Ingram's husband, Mary Ingram's husband. And so there's a storyline there where he seduces her, and then he essentially, and again, not all of these things happen at once. I'm kind of going a little out of order, but he essentially marries her, takes control of her property, and then um, unalives her essentially. And so, even though I don't like that term, but I don't. But anyway, um, so he does. So that's his storyline, one of his storylines, and then so over the course of the story, you have this forbidden romance, and you also have this witch character who gives a prophecy, and who turns out to be later the mother of Desmond, and then she gives several prophecies and then collapses and dies. Um, but then and Frederick, I'm mention some minor character, also has a secretary named Rachel, who's very endearing and sweet, and she's one of the few people who understands him. But then he ends up sending her away before the revolution begins because he cares about her. And anyway, there's also this man named Thomas Lockhart who is later executed later on in the story, who's a fellow businessman. And so anyway, so Bertrand Shaw, Desmond Archer, and this character who shows up later, Reverend Hartstone, who is kind of a reverend, a spiritual leader in the town. He handles that angle. They essentially lead a revolution and take over the town and start executing people and business owners, and again, this happens towards the end. But then they a lot of the stories a build up to it. But then they take Frederick Harris and they throw him in the blast furnace where they make the steel, and so he has a horrible graphic death, Frederick Harris. And then of course then Edward, who they find out was a traitor who was spying for Frederick, he is then placed in prison. And then Catherine thinks, well, how am I going to get him out of this? I need to do something. Well, Bertrand Shaw ends up feeling really guilty that all these executions are taking place. He doesn't think that this is the right way to do things. So he ends up having a change of heart, even though he was very cold towards the beginning. And so then he arranges a conference where he tries to tell his audience that no, they can't keep executing people. But then they essentially turn on him, and Desmond ends up hitting him in the head with an axe, and Bertrand Shaw dies. And so his own followers essentially end up eating him alive, so to speak. And after that, you have Catherine, who goes to Reverend Hartstone and says, "I want I want to save Edward. How can I do that?" And Reverend Hartstone believes in this idea of blood sacrifice, this idea that someone can pay for the sins of someone else. And so she ends up persuading Reverend Hartstone that she should die in Edward's place. So then Edward is let go, but then you have Desmond, who is furious that that the Reverend let him go, because Desmond trusted Edward. He almost has an unhealthy infatuation with him, and so when that happened, he says, "I'm going to kill Edward anyway." So they end up getting into this huge battle, this dramatic, climactic fight on ice in the snow, over this creek or river or lake or whatever. And Edward ends up killing Desmond by cutting his throat with the axe, and Desmond then falls into the ice water, and his body disappears. But he's too late to save Catherine, who goes to her death. She's executed. She's hanged. She's killed, but she dies saving the man that she loves. And that's one of the unique things about the book, is that the woman ends up sacrificing herself for the man, not the other way around. And so Reverend Hartstone is still left at the end. He's in control of the revolution, but it's clear though that he could lose control at any time. And so Edward survives, Reverend Hartstone survives, Rachel, the secretary, survives, everyone else dies. And so that is essentially the book. Again, I haven't touched on a lot of of themes and nuances, and the book is much more complicated than that. But that is the overall basic plot. So I hope you enjoyed listening to the summary.